Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Gosto TV. I am so glad that you're here this awesome day. It's been a little hot here in LA, wherever you may be. I hope that you're enjoying this beautiful day. It seems like we're in the middle of fall and things are just happening. Today, I am so excited. We're going to be talking to Glen Peterson about the idea of how to have joy in advocacy. You know how sometimes you go and you kind of see something in the news, you read something that, it's a topic of immigration or refugees or people who are marginalized. And a lot of people, Glenn, seem to have a lot of opinions about it, and a lot of times it can be a contentious kind of thing. Not often do people find joy in talking about immigration or refugees. But first, Glenn, as a way of introduction, I want to welcome you for being here, so thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So Glen Peterson, he is the Office Director for World Relief here in LA in Garden Grove, and we have a bit of a history. We've been friends for a long time, and through a friend of a friend, actually my father-in-law. So thank you again, Glenn, for having me.
And through your blogs and Facebook.
That's right. So we've been Facebooking, and virtual friends actually now are becoming true friends. That's good.
That's right.
Yeah. So today again on Gosto Family, we're going to be talking about how to have joy in the middle of being an advocate for the least of these. And what I love most about you, Glenn, is, as we were talking earlier, is that people that are, quote, minorities or immigrants call you Tío Glenn. And
I've been called a lot of things, and that's one of them.
Exactly. And for me as Latino myself, as an immigrant myself, it means the world to be able to call you Tío Glenn. So Tío Glenn, bienvenido a este programa.
Gracias.
So Glenn, you are an advocate. You're not an immigrant yourself, but you are in many ways, I guess we all are, but maybe not the traditional, typical immigrant look. But yet you are an advocate. You're someone who truly has found joy in representing people that it would be easy to dismiss. It would be easy to look down even upon. And today we face a lot of prejudice and things that have happened with Mike Brown. There's a lot of tension at times when it comes to things of race and prejudice and this. But I wanted to ask you, Glenn, first, just even before we get into the questions, what is your favorite non-traditional food? Like, what do you enjoy eating that is a non-traditional food? It's not pizza and burgers and fries. Like, what would that be?
Well, my default favorite for going out is I always want to go to Mexican food.
Okay.
So some people, those people who call me Tío, they think I'm kind of Mexican. And if it doesn't have tortillas, is it really food?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that would be...
Yeah, so I think a lot of our people will really relate to that.
By the way, that's traditional for a lot of people, so that was a little hard to answer that question as non-traditional.
Yeah, so isn't that amazing though how, it's like you would think one thing is traditional for some and it's non-traditional for others. That's the beauty of cultures. So getting into now a little bit of the meat of our program, Glenn, again, you're an advocate for immigrants, for refugees. You have an amazing story of where this joy that you have, this amazing demeanor and this peace that you have about you, how God has brought you to this place. So I wanted to ask you first, I always ask my guests, what's that sense of adventure? What is that hair on fire experience of your youth, of college, of early marriage, where you began to realize that there was something crazy about you? There was something that you're like, this is the real me. Tell us about your adventure.
You should ask my wife what's the crazy thing about me. I'm sure she could give you a list. But I think, part of this adventure started when I heard a preacher, a pastor named John Perkins speak. And he was telling people, don't try to reach out to people who are different from you by driving into their neighborhood and just delivering stuff. He said, move into the neighborhood, be incarnational about ministry. And I took him at his word, and I did that. When I went to seminary in Denver, the seminary's out in the suburbs. It was a great place to be, but I moved into the inner city. And my neighbors kind of looked at me like, you're really different. You don't look like the rest of us in this neighborhood. And I think that's one of the first times that I realized I was starting on this adventure that was very different from my colleagues in seminary, the church that I grew up in. a lot of water has passed under the bridge since then, but when I moved back to the Los Angeles area from Colorado, I ended up being part of an immigrant church, a Spanish-speaking church, and I became part of people's families. You know, people would call me tío, hermano, these kind of things. I didn't feel like really an outsider there. People would make jokes about Glenn. He doesn't look it, but he's really Mexican.
We are almost twins.
Almost twins,
Almost,
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's definitely when I realized I was on a different adventure from most people I knew, and I started getting a lot of joy out of those relationships. I learned things about faith. You know, when you think you're self-sufficient, you don't have to have a lot of faith. But when you're on the edge, you're disenfranchised. You can't. You don't know where your food's going to come from tomorrow. You have a lot of faith. And then hospitality and generosity. You know, I always, you know, grew up thinking, well, we're hospitable to people. That means, you know, you invite your friends over, and they're going to invite you over next week.
Yeah.
You know, that you're going to reciprocate.
Right.
But the kind of generosity and hospitality I learned was, you know, we're not doing this for you because you can return something, or I'm not expecting anything in return. They just, you know, invite you in, and you become part of, you know, whatever they're having for lunch that day, or whatever thing that they're happening, they include you.
That's right.
And it's really a good feeling of generosity, hospitality.
And that set you in this kind of adventure to be different and yet experience so much love, and we'll talk about love here in a second. So take me back to John Perkins, because I think a lot of our viewers may or may not know who he is. I have had the privilege to hear him as well. The power of a word, of a preacher, right?
Yeah.
How did he change your life? You know, he talks about, I know, the 3 R's and moving back into the neighborhood. Tell us about John Perkins and what did he do to you?
Well, I think of John Perkins as a friend, as a distance mentor. If he's in town, I go here and speak. I talk to him. I try to hang out with his group, with the Christian Community Development group. And he's somebody who has some really challenging ideas, like, you know, moving back into the neighborhood and reconciliation and relationships. And, you know, he's a guy who models that. But I don't know, the interesting thing about him is he's humble. He doesn't preach about things that he doesn't do himself.
Wow.
He's got a lot of wisdom. He loves the Bible. He loves the Lord. You know, stuff that you know. I mean, this is a guy who like grew up in this really poor neighborhood. He got beat up during the civil rights era. He found the Lord at a Bible class in somebody's home. Just a really simple man with a simple faith, but challenging people. And I listened to that, and I responded to that, and it was hard. And John Perkins would agree that this is really hard work. It's not easy, but he's been a distance mentor and someone I've appreciated over the years.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I've had the privilege also to hear him, and he is a challenging man. He talks about, like I said, this idea of relocation and relationship and reconciliation. My goodness. So now, like John Perkins, I'm sure he also had a lot of crises. I want to move into the area of crises. The reason why I like talking about crises for all of us out there in Gozo Nation and Gozoville, living on Gozo Street, is because, you know, it's something that we don't often hear from our mentors, and we don't often talk about those tough moments. You know, Abraham, the idol and the amazing example for so many people of faith, went through a bit of a crisis when he had to surrender his own son. And God tested him to see if really, are you going to believe me or not? Trust me or not? So, Glenn, you as an advocate, as an advocate of immigrants and refugees, my guess is you've had some times of crises where you thought, hey, I'm going in this direction, and then God's like, no, you're not. So tell us, what have been 1 or 2 moments of crises in your life that caused you to reevaluate that sense of adventure, but really strengthened it in some ways?
So, I mentioned that I went to seminary, and I graduated from seminary, but I didn't go into like a traditional church ministry. Okay. I actually ended up getting a sales job. Even if you're a grad school graduate, you still have to earn a living and pay for rent and buy food. Yeah. So here I was selling construction products and being fairly successful at it, but I found like ministry in the church by becoming part of this immigrant church. Okay. Becoming friends with these people, and I say these people like they're those people over there, but they became friends. That's right, it's my family. Mm-hmm. And then when you talk about crisis is different for all kinds of people, but crisis included people's immigration status. It included poverty. It included things that happen in people's family, interactions with the law. I can remember several instances where a family crisis happened and we all got together and you strategize, what are we going to do? Somebody got in trouble with the law. It looks like they're going to be in jail. There's going to be some court appearances. Well, who speaks English well? Well, Glenn does. He's going to be there in court.
Theo Glenn comes to the rescue.
Right. My cousin is here. This primo from some hill country in Mexico. I remember this guy. He got here and city life was not working out for him. Yeah. He was medicating with alcohol. Yeah. Everybody was worried about him. And they said, we've got to do something for this guy. Glenn, can you take him back? He needs to go to Tijuana and get on a bus. We need someone to take him to the bus station, make sure he gets on the bus and goes back home. And I was, like all these crises that we could handle together. Yeah.
People go through a lot in their lives.
Yeah, so there's all these crises being involved in those. Yeah. My path towards even getting involved in immigration law.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. Is seminary to business. Now, what did that do to you? I mean, here you are, like wanting to be a pastor of a church and maybe eventually become the next Rick Warren, or something. And here you are, like selling stuff. And so, I mean, how did that shape you? Did that kind of like confuse you a bit?
Well, yeah, it was confusing, but because I was doing ministry at the same time, and it was real ministry with real people, and it was in the church, I was a resource, and those people were a resource back to me. Yeah. Even though I had some self-esteem issues because here I've got an MDiv. Yeah. Why am I not working in the church or a missionary or what have you? But I was still involved in ministry, still working with people, and got to share my faith with folks. Kind of became a bridge between Anglo church and immigrant church. But sometimes these kids would grow up and they need to get into school, or they need to get into college or a job, and they don't have a social security number. Yeah. I remember one mom coming to me saying that her son needs to get a job. Here he is 18 years old and he's wasting his time in school, eating us out of house and home. That was her big issue because when you're 18, you eat a lot of food.
Yeah,
and
as boys do.
She goes, her immigration story was she came through a lawyer, she came the legal way, but she brought her son when he was 3 years old. It cost her $3,000 for her papers through an attorney. Why would you spend that money on a 3-year-old? Yeah. So here he is, he's grown up in this country, he's a smart kid looking for a job. And so we started looking around for legal help. Yeah, of course. And the short story was there was no legal help. Yeah, there's no path. And this started a passion in me for advocacy about the immigration system. Yeah. It's not controversial that we have a broken immigration system. I guess where it becomes controversial is how we're going to solve the problem. Yeah. And that's where things become political.
So let's talk about this now. We're getting into the area of love. I can see how you're brightening up even as we talk, which is so awesome. Because you're a man of joy for the immigrant. You're an advocate. So tell us, you had this adventure when you were in college and you were like trying to just do all these amazing things, and then you had this crisis coming out of seminary. And so my guess is that all that stuff has produced in you this amazing drive, this connection, this, what you said earlier off camera, this caldo de pollo. This familial sense of food and flavors and smells and deep love and pain that comes with the love. So tell us about this caldo de pollo, this love that you have, and who is that person that you love?
Well, again, it's family. It's a sense of, it's not them, it's not those immigrants, it's part of my family. It makes it's part of who I am.
Yeah.
Learning about faith and those things. And it's through these relationships and these friendships where, this was years ago, this kid who was, graduating from high school, needs to get a green card. But today there's so many people in a really similar situation. And there's there's things that we can do as Christians, as people of faith.
Yeah.
There's, but we need to step forward and do it. Even if it's, you talked about crisis, this is where we step into like controversy. Yeah. That everybody knows that we want to change the law. The question is how we're going to do it. Is it the Republicans who can do it better? Is it the Democrats who can do it better?
Yeah.
And you have to step forward and do some things. And we've had some amazing opportunities to speak truth to power. When Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House, we had a meeting with her and her staff.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And we talked about how we envisioned as Christians that particular meeting was both elected officials from California and a group of Christians, pastors, rabbis, priests, and we talked about the fact that everybody agrees that we need to move forward.
Yeah.
And we brought stories, these passionate stories. That we know kids in our neighborhoods where we live. We know kids in our churches who are growing up in this country, know no other country than this one.
That's right.
Who can't adjust their immigration status.
Right.
So, part of my journey has been to become Board of Immigration Appeals accredited. I can actually practice immigration law today, where 20 years ago, or how many years ago that was.
Right.
I was, looking for, how do you find legal help for people? But I've gotten educated so I can do that. I'm not an attorney.
Yeah.
We're not that far along, but we can do that. We can speak truth to power. We can do all of these things to advocate for our friends.
Yeah.
And you asked about love, and I'm not sure if I'm exactly going that direction, but these are actually acts of love and compassion because they're your friends.
Exactly, yeah.
Not because they're those immigrants.
Exactly, and really, I think the thing that I want to draw from what you're saying that is so powerful for all of our listeners is that love must turn into action. Love has to eventually turn into compassion. James in Scripture obviously talks about, if you have faith but no deeds, then where is your faith? And, love is not only, caldo de pollo. Yes, I love that myself, pan dulce, and having, people over. But eventually, we need to be advocates. We need to be people that write the letter and do the civil disobedience, or whatever it may be, to represent those that are in need.
Yeah.
Yeah, so truly that is love.
Yeah, and that's where I get a lot of joy that you're talking about here, is by, that same passage in James, it says real religion is taking care of the widows and the orphans, and it's doing something.
That's right.
It's not just thinking the right thoughts, but it's acting on those thoughts and
Yeah.
stepping out into ways that you would never have thought that you would have. I'm sure the way this came across, like telling you about having a meeting with Nancy Pelosi, as if I'm all of that, and I'm really not. That does not drive me. We've got some friends who are advocates. They just are driven by getting in front of Congress people and senators, and I'm not. Really, what I believe that because I'm a Christian and I have these friends, and because we live in a democratic type of a government where we're supposed to speak out these things, and our government is supposed to respond to what the community is about, that's why I step in to do that. It's love for my own community, love for the immigrant community that's around me.
That is so powerful. And so I wanted to ask you some practical questions. A lot of our viewers, it could be an uncle that they have that's dealing with immigration status issues. It could be maybe their own young son or daughter, like this friend that you had. It could be someone who's in church, a faith leader, who wants to truly get involved and help, but they're hearing all their friends or construction workers who are, concerned that jobs are being taken away. And there are no easy answers, and I know that you're not the immigration answer man. But tell us maybe some of the ways that people that are wanting to take that next step can get involved. What are you personally advocating or helping, facilitating, so that people can take that next step?
Let me frame this by because the questions that I get often. We start with the fact that it's part of human nature that people migrate. Okay. We do. You migrate to a different state, a different city. Some people cross international borders. Let's set that aside. The fact is that there's a lot of immigrants in Southern California. Yeah. We have immigrants. Yeah. They become our neighbors. Yeah. What's interesting, you talked about faith leaders and the church. What can the church do? It's interesting in the immigrant church and the immigrant pastors that I talk to, it's obvious that the church is the most relevant institution in the lives of an immigrant family. Yeah. That fact is obvious to the immigrant pastor. When I talk to a more Anglo congregation and talk about that idea that even their church can become a relevant institution in the lives of their neighbors, people who want to reach neighbors that look different from them. But if the church can get informed on what the Bible has to say about immigration, about what the law is like, the need for change and some things that they can do, and inviting and welcoming their neighbor into their community, that starts to transform. It starts to transform that church. It transforms the immigrant community that they're in, and it's a mutual kind of transformation because both become better. Wow. You know, if a discipleship pastor wants to help someone walk with Jesus more, I'm going to say, let's meet an immigrant.
Oh man, this is so powerful.
Because that's my story of discipleship.
Man, that is so powerful.
Is that, and we see people, the practical things. Individual people can come into my office. We could assign them a brand new immigrant or refugee, someone who's been forcefully displaced from their country of origin. They come to this country and they have no friends. We hear this over and over again. The exciting part is that the refugee comes to my office after I introduce them to an American and a Christian. He goes, this one guy has just articulated it so well. He said, I never knew that I was going to have a friend in the United States. I never imagined it. Because now I've got this, we call them a volunteer. Now I have this friend. He's the best friend I've ever had. He's like having 100 friends. And that's the kind of story. So this guy's learning about American culture. He's practicing English. He's being integrated into the American culture. And the guy who was the volunteer, he's being transformed. Volunteers come back to me and say, I never knew that I could have this much impact in a person's life and that I would be changed.
And now, what I was thinking is, most of us may think that it's Latinos and people from Mexico and Salvador, but I know you're talking about a different population. Who exactly are we talking about?
So, the door that I came into the whole immigration thing were my Latino, Mexican, and Central American friends. Right. Today, the refugee population that's coming here are refugees coming in from Afghanistan and Iraq. There are
very relevant topics. I mean, speaking of Iraq and all that we're facing right now.
So because of the wars over there and because the U.S. military has had a presence, some of those Iraqis became friends of the U.S. military and they worked for our military as interpreters, as contractors, and now they're coming here as refugees and they're looking for a new life. Because their home country, everything has changed because of all the violence, the disruption of war, and the stuff that happened that led up to the war. So Iraqis and Afghans are the ones who are coming. We have 28 individuals coming this month. 28 people coming this month. There's some others sprinkled in there, but most of them are from Iraq and Afghanistan.
Wow. So this topic is so fascinating to me because I think it breaks the mold of kind of who we're talking about. It's almost like talking about Canadians, undocumented people. It's like, what? But my first experience with this refugee story and narrative was actually in Denver. I was coaching a soccer team, and the school was mostly Latino and white mixed together. But there were like 3 or 4 children from Iraq. And you know what they loved about Denver? They were telling me I never would have known this if I hadn't been in a soccer team. They love the weather because somehow, you would think Iraq desert, right? But somehow this family lived in a part of Iraq that was more like in the 50s. in the 40s even,
Yeah.
up in the mountains perhaps, I'm not
Yep.
sure where. But, talk about like breaking those stereotypes of immigration and refugees is not just people from Mexico and Central America. And Iraqis aren't just here because it's hot or, there's some connections. I guess my point is, unless you get into those relationships and be in a soccer team with families from other countries, and they were a refugee family, you will never know their story. So I wanted to wrap up, Glenn. This has been so fascinating to me. I'm learning so much. You mentioned a program per se that you have between families, and I don't know if it's your church or churches in general. Tell us about how can a family, how are you connecting church with families? What are you doing with that?
So what we call it is a good neighbor team.
Okay.
So the ideal good neighbor team is a family from a church.
Okay.
With kids, the husband, wife, kids, and we've got refugee families coming in,
okay.
husband, wife, kids, and we're gonna put them in the same room. We're gonna do some things so they can start to develop some kind of friendship.
Okay.
And then the refugee family needs some kind of help. They don't have a driver's license yet,
Okay.
so they need rides
Okay.
to doctor's appointments or go to the Social Security office. There's a lot of bureaucracy about being a refugee. I said the doctor's appointments. Every refugee is fully health screened before they get here. Once they get here, they go through the same health screening again for all of the the diseases. But so these rides, so the families kind of become friends,
Yeah.
and they start talking to each other, and the kids play with each other, and you just see relationships grow naturally out of this. And the American family becomes more interesting. This is what they tell me. I think I'm so much more interesting now that I know somebody from Afghanistan or Iraq, and we actually have these relationships. It's so fun to watch the kids, because the kids don't speak a word of English, and of course the American kids don't speak any Arabic or Farsi or Pashto or wherever these families are from. But they start playing together. We put out games, or there's a soccer ball, and they start laughing with each other.
Iraqis love soccer.
They
totally do.
It looks like they're talking to each other, but in their own language, and they're laughing, and they're just having a great time.
Yeah.
So that's really the fun thing. It's great if the American family has the support of a church. So that's how the Good Neighbor team, the American family with their American church, they can help. Some refugees come with a plastic bag. That's the only thing they own. So we look for furniture donations and all of those, setting up someone's kitchen with all the kinds of staple foods that you need, and pots and pans.
Yeah.
Where churches can do a food drive and all this stuff to just help set up a household.
Yeah.
And
that's
then
what they need.
And people from these countries, they have this really interesting things that I don't see in a lot of Americans. You can go to their house and you just sit. You have tea. You just relax. We're going to be together. Even if you don't have much of a shared language, you have a conversation in what words you do know, but you're going to sip tea. Or you're going to taste some, this past week I had a dish of rice, raisins, and carrots. It's from Afghanistan.
Raisins, and carrots.
And they just so much wanted me to have
Jr.
some food.
Exactly, right?
No, not Carl Jr.
Not
exactly.
Carl Jr.
And it was delicious. But they just wanted me to sit down and to eat with them and to share life with them. And it was just, those are rich experiences.
Wow, no wonder, just as we wrap up this amazing time, that you experience joy in advocacy. I mean, the richness of your life, it is evident.
It's evident to me too.
Yeah.
And it feels like, there's parts of me that God made for this.
Yeah.
And that's why I get joy out of it. The more I steer out of doing what God wants me to do, the less I feel joy.
Yeah, and that's the lesson I think for all of us, is the adventure that God has given you, the sense of crisis, the things you've been through, and it's turned into love. And I think that's the example to all of us out there. You might be out there thinking, I want to get involved, and maybe immigration and refugee advocacy isn't it, which I encourage you to do that, and I want you to give people all of your credentials and your links. But it might be that you need to just be open in your house. I love the idea of why don't we just sit together and drink some tea?
Yeah.
You know, hospitality, right, in the American culture has gone to a computer and to now it's an Apple Watch. I mean, there's no hospitality when you're like staring at a watch all day long, right?
Right.
It's just gone. You know, Netflix doesn't give you anything back as far as caldo de pollo or rice with raisins. It just doesn't happen. And this is the richness of talking about joy, talking about adventure and crisis in love. This is the richness that we're really advocating with you and people like you, guests, that are truly living out loud this radical life that is changing people, changing the world in very quiet and yet loud ways. So Glen, I did want to ask you, how can people reach you? You know, I know you work for World Relief here in Garden Grove, in a local suburb here in LA, in Orange County. How can people reach you if they want you to come to their church to speak, if they want to read something maybe that you've written or articles that you've talked about, if they want to just be a part of what you're doing, how can they reach you?
Well, you can go to our website, which is worldreliefgardengrove.org. That's one way, and there's fields you can fill out, and it sends me an email. You can find us on Facebook. I think if you just put in the search parameters, World Relief Garden Grove or World Relief Southern California, will pop up. You can like us there, and I post things from time to time there.
Yeah, got it. And we'll put all of these links at the bottom of this show so you can just click on them and get a hold of Glen. So Glen, we have talked so much today about joy, and my heart is filled. I'm hungry now, all this food talk, and yet my heart is stirred to be a more compassionate person. I can think of so many stories in my life, not just here in my neighborhood, but in the church where I'm currently pastoring, where there are people that feel like they're on the outside looking in. And so I want to thank you. Before we wrap up, we have some jokes that we want to tell. And because this is, after all, the Trig Podcast of Joy in Gozo TV. So I had Glen look through a couple of jokes that he likes, and I think you have a joke that you want to tell us. Is that correct?
So yeah, David gave me this joke, and since he's got kids and I've got a dog,
3.
The difference between or why dogs are better than children.
Oh no.
So number 1, they eat less. They eat less. They usually come when they're called. They're easier to train. They don't ask for money all the time. They don't drink or smoke. They don't hang out with friends who use drugs. They never ask to drive my car. They don't want to have any of the latest fashions. They don't want to wear your clothes. They don't need $1 gazillion for college. And if they get pregnant, you can sell their kids.
That last one's a little over the line.
These are your jokes.
These are my jokes. Blame me. Oh man, thank you, Glen. Thank you so much. I truly appreciate you just expressing your heart to people and being willing to be here and be open, be vulnerable, and most of all express this passion that God's given you for the immigrant, something close to my heart for the refugee. And I want to just encourage all of you, Gozo heads, Gozo Nation, Gozo family, all of you living on Gozo Street. Be an advocate. Give of yourself. Love. Make sure that love turns into doing. Love is a verb, as some people say. And get a hold of Glen. If you want to know more about immigration advocacy, you want to know more about refugees, you want to eat some rice with some raisins and some, zanahoria, some stuff in there, get a hold of this guy. Glen is here local. If you're in the area, or if you want to have him come and speak at your church, at your nonprofit, at your banquet, at your fall event, get a hold of this amazing guy. Like him on Facebook. Go to his website. I personally have been so blessed by you. And again, thank you guys for being here. Thank you so much for being a part of Gozo Nation. Thank you for checking in. Make sure that you like us on Facebook. Make sure that you go to iTunes and look for Gozo TV, Gozo. It's not Gozo like Bozo the Clown, it's Gozo. But look us up in iTunes. Go to our website, davidtrigg.com. All these episodes are on there. Go to our YouTube channel, DTriggeros1, so you can see this video. And by the way, I want to invite you next Wednesday, actually just a couple of days, September 17th, we're going to have our second live webinar with 4 amazing experts in the area of fear, anxiety, health, nutrition for adults and kids, and even we're going to talk about relationships and addictions. So please check in just a couple of days. Go to davidtrigg.com and click on the registration button, and you can watch us live. You can tweet your questions, tweet any comments that you have on a Google Hangout in just a couple of days. Have a great rest of the day, Gozo heads. Have a great, awesome day, and I will see you next time.